you want to let us know where you're from. So we have Canadians, people from Malta, Spain, England, our guests from Malaysia. Maybe let us know where you're from. That would be awesome. And then we will begin. Like I said, we're recording, so people out there that weren't able to make it, they will be able to take advantage of the recording. So you can use your chat box during this presentation, during this webinar, and you can post questions. You can also unmute your microphone at any time, and you can jump in with a question. It's all up to you. No worries. It's a very kind of a collegial atmosphere. We are going to be talking about guilt today. So if you have not had the opportunity to join that Facebook group, we want you to know this is going to be kind of like a live version of it. The whole idea of collegiality. And we have a United States representative, an American. We were just saying the Americans won the championship last Shop Talk. So congratulations to the United States of America for showing their French teaching superiority over the rest of us and having the title for another year. Okay. All right. So I would like to just get going if we could. Does that sound good, Gianfranco?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, thank you everybody for coming. First of all, the entire idea of Shop Talk, which started 3 years ago, was this idea of getting connected. And so if you are indeed on the French playground, like I said, we are going to share with you really a perfect landing site for you, which is the Guilt Facebook group. For myself, if you ever wanted to connect with me, you can find me at facebook.com/ATNDJDelph. I won't go into why that's the name, but anyways, on Instagram, it's at DJDelph, or on Twitter at ATN2. We, of course, Shop Talk costs money to run all this stuff, so we do like to thank our sponsors, the DJ Delph Kit and the French Playground itself, which is where this is from. And if you have not seen this or have not tried this, if you teach French, you must. You can get a copy of this for free. This is one of the new French missions that are coming out through the French Playground in 2018, and this is one of them. It's a lot of fun. It's where you'll have your students look at the screen, and they have to read all this in less than 30 seconds. So they have to read all the colors in less than 30 seconds. The challenge being they're not reading the word. They're reading the color. So they would have to actually literally say bleu, jaune, vert, orange. So it's very difficult because it goes against your kind of, it's a what do you call that, a brain twister or whatever. So it's just kind of fun. So there's going to be 40 such missions as that. So try that out and have fun with it. Today, I'm going to just drop my camera out of here so I'm going to make more room. And feel free to stay, Gianfranco, with yours, please. So our guest is Dr. Gianfranco Conti. Thank you so very much for joining us from Malaysia at what is now past 2 a.m. in the morning. This is fantastic. Speaking of being connected, right there is your Twitter account. Is that spelled correctly? I think it is, right? It looks like it is.
Gianfranco Conti 9, yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So, and would you say that's one of many ways to get connected with you, correct?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Let's delve in. Sorry, I'm like a little excited here. All right. Could you tell us something about your background, please?
Well, I'm Italian. I trained in England in the 90s, early 90s. That shows how old I am. And after training in England at High University, I started to teach in England for a couple of years. I felt my training had been okay, but I felt I needed to learn a little bit more about teaching. So I decided to do a master's in TEFL and teaching English as a foreign language. That was really good because kind of got me interested in research. It got me started in the field, and then I decided to do a PhD at Reading. That was really an eye-opener, and after that I went on to help out Professor Makara from Oxford University on a massive research project, which was really interesting because it was like a large-scale project in Oxford Comprehensive Schools, quite challenging project to show me the perils of doing research in schools. But it was, again, really great opportunity to just understand what goes on in kids' minds as they learned. It was a project in learning strategies. Then I went on teaching in England for a while. Then about 13 years ago, I took this massive step to move countries, and in Malaysia, where I reside now, completely different ball game altogether from England. It's an international school called Garden International School. It's really big, it's like 2,000 kids, and high tech, and kids who are super well behaved. Not the kind of environment I was used to teach before. And then I started to share my resources on the TS about 4 or 5 years ago. Then I won the award, which gave me a lot of attention in England and abroad. And then after that, I went on to write my blog, and then took call for the book with Steve Meath, who you interviewed last week or 2 weeks ago, I think.
That's right, yeah.
And here I am now.
Okay, I must ask you, because you said once you started your PhD, that was an eye-opener. Can you kind of expand on what you meant by that?
Yeah, because you see, up until then, even during my master's, you get an idea of how kids learn, how people acquire languages from the research articles that you read and that. But it was really when I started to do some research, and I really had to understand what research really is about, and how rigorous you have to be before you make claims. And then in a way, it had two effects. On the one hand, I really understood the importance of doing research in a certain way, much more rigorously, much more in a more accountable kind of way. On the other hand, though, it made me aware of the fact that research is fraught with glitches, inaccuracies, and you can't necessarily 100% rely on your findings unless you run massive, scale kind of sort of research. That was an eye-opener, because you really made me aware of what goes on in people's minds as they acquire languages. And as a teacher, I was never given this window of opportunity, so it was a game changer for me.
Okay, you know what? I have to tell you, because I love how you just said how basically, all research isn't perfect. And this is what I find most refreshing about reading your blogs and your responses to other people's questions, is the open, transparent, honest advice that you give for somebody who's so well read. Okay, and so more than I am, I can only speak for myself, but I believe I can speak for the majority of teachers, that you're more well read than we are. I love how you're able to do that. You're able to, even today, after studying and experiencing so many things, teaching with other people, teaching in other places, talking with other people, working with other people, that you're able to say, you just, I don't know, you just get it. And I really appreciate it, because it's kind of a microcosm of how I wished everybody kind of lived their lives, which is more open. What I find refreshing too about the things that you write too is that where I find that some of us will get lost in doing the same old thing over and over and over again. You helped remind us of strategies and thought processes that we've maybe long forgotten, and then you also introduce us to new ones, and we're talking about often research-based proven practices too. So I love this. We're trying to let people know that research-based proven stuff means something, first of all. It really honestly does. But we're also open to always improving. So that's really cool.
Totally. You see, it's very easy. Like there was some gentleman a while ago on the Facebook group saying, "Oh yeah, research doesn't apply to England. All all carried out in America, in universities and all that. And that's true to a certain extent. On the other hand, you know, humans tend to have more or less the same advantages, disadvantages. You know, our brains work pretty much the same way. You know, somebody could be smarter than others or faster than others, but to actually be completely anti-research just because, you know, it hasn't been carried out in classrooms in England, but it's carried out in Japan or Greece or Turkey or whatever, it's just not a valid argument. You know, you don't use research to necessarily believe everything that you read, but you get glimpses, you know, you get intuitions, you get suggestions, and then you try them out in your classroom, and if they work, they work, and if they don't, you just dismiss it as something that doesn't work for you.
Absolutely.
And your students.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Okay. All right, let's go on to the second question that I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned blogs. And for those people who don't know, you absolutely, you're an amazing blogger. So could you share more about, you know, what is your blog? Talk about the Language Gym and the mission of the Language Gym, and just the work that you do in general.
Yeah, well, it started, to be honest with you, to sort of disseminate research, because I felt that when I was a teacher, especially at the beginning of my career, I felt like there was a massive gap in the way they prepared me for teaching, and I really wanted to know more. You know, I felt that something major was missing when I was planning my lessons. I didn't have a principled framework of sort, you know. I felt like I was putting nice or cool activities together in response to an objective in the syllabus, in the curricula that somebody else had planned for me. You know, we call them schemes of work in England. And I felt, okay, this is a cool activity, this is also quite cool, this is fun, this is interesting, this might work, but I didn't have actually a framework. And the reason why I didn't have a framework is because I wasn't clear as to how languages are learned. I'm not 100% clear even now, to be honest with you. I have to be adamant about that. You know, I don't have like all the answers, but I didn't have a framework, and I felt that I was just constantly trialing things and without really a purpose, a proper framework. And I felt that because I acquired this over the years, I've been teaching now, what, 30 years, almost like 27, 28 years, and plus my research, my readings and all that, I thought, you know, maybe this might help other teachers get a bit of an idea, at least of the kind of theory I espouse, because, you know, there's so many theories and so many methods. And I thought that I would do that in a balanced way when possible, and in a very provocative way where I felt fit, you know. And so the blog has two missions, really. One is to disseminate research, proper research, you know, and mediate between this really kind of impenetrable theorists and researchers who write in their own language, which teachers can never find accessible. And on the other hand, to basically provoke a reaction and get teachers to think about their practice in the light of research. So sometimes I publish blogs that are quite controversial on purpose. I don't necessarily always believe what I write, you know, like I wrote a blog, 6 useless things teachers do that caused outrage, you know. I think it had something like 60 or 70,000 hits in one night, just to give you an idea. I received hate mails and all sort of insults on Twitter and that. Then I wrote another one recently that got me kicked out from a Facebook group. It was 13 commonly made errors in language instruction. I still don't understand why I got kicked out, but anyway, it was kind of controversial. And the good thing is that blog is actually on the read lists of PGC, courses, which is teacher training courses in England, because apparently it was a good way of provoking, causing students to think about common practices.
Absolutely.
So it's basically, I went to with Steve Smith actually, and other people. I went to this present at Oxford Research Ed, and it's this kind of movement organization created by Tom Bennett, who basically the mission is to steer away from folk teaching, like the kind of teaching that it just gets passed on from generation to generation, and try to get research to inform our choices, our pedagogic choices. And I like that, and I like to believe that this is the kind of stuff that I'm doing, trying and tell teachers, okay, this is the research available, this is how I interpret it, what do you think? If you get outraged by it and you hate me for that, okay. If you want to try it out, have a go. And I got mixed responses. I got a lot of teachers telling me that they agree, others that they disagree, but at least you got them to think about their practices. So that's a good thing.
Absolutely, because when you think about it, if there was an answer, the answer in education, you would have think it would have arrived by now, So Socrates,
absolutely.
Plato and Socrates would have figured it out for all of us back then, but it's just it boggles my mind a little bit. I'm going to use the word ignorance, okay? And I don't want to be kicked out of a Facebook group, but I'm going to use the word ignorance here on the part of some of our colleagues who assume that either A, there's one way, or B, that there's no way. Believe it or not, there's those people who actually think that as well. So refreshing is a word that I put, and then there was a lot of people making comments in the chat box, so supporting what you were saying too, feeling the same thing from all over the world. So that must make you feel good, eh? When you go on Gilton and you get the support. I know the hate stuff that I love how you take it with a grain of salt. That's great. But it must feel good when you do have that many, say, likes and comments about a work that you've produced, because it's provoked so much thought.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's amazing.
So I hope you didn't know, I was shamelessly flashing your website while you were talking.
Yeah, I saw it. I'm not very happy with it because there's still glitches. I'm still in the process of perfecting it, but to be honest with you, I just don't have the time. It's just, my life is crazy because I'm a full-time teacher and I'm trying to do way too much. I'm still human. I haven't evolved in the meta-human person I like to be, and I just so that's, hopefully it will be improved as of next year, hopefully.
Yeah, no. Okay, so I was curious, what is, when we talk about approaches then, just give us, let's talk about one or a couple if you wish, but what is your best view, the best approach to foreign language teaching itself? You touched on it, you really did, but let's go a little bit deeper. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, you see, I love this question because I don't have the answer to it. And I think that the whole issue of trying to answer that question is starts from who you're teaching and where, with what resources, If I had, say, 5 hours a week, 6 hours a week, and I was teaching super smart kids, I would possibly teach completely differently to the way that I'm teaching now. And I would say to those people, sometimes appear on our Facebook group or other Facebook groups that say, it's this is the way you should teach. I say, all the methods that have come up in the last since the beginning of teaching languages, possibly the Romans, the Greeks and the Romans, every single method up to now has its own merits, and it's funny how people keep saying, you know, all right, okay, whatever is past should really just, it's just legacy, you know, let's move on and let's embrace this method and this fad, and it keeps going on and on and on. And you throw everything that was beforehand because you want to promote your own new method, because obviously there's politics attached to it, there's money attached to it. And when you actually look at each of these methods that we criticize and call legacy methods, they all have something which actually works. And what is great about research at the moment is recognizing a lot of the things that we chucked away because they are legacy beliefs or legacy approaches actually do something to the brain, which is good. I mean, think about translation, you know. Yes, I wouldn't use translation necessarily a lot with an advanced kid because I'll be able to use the target language, I'll be able to use paraphrases and synonyms and antonyms and all the sort of language I may want to use to explain things. On the other hand, at beginner level, if you have kids who all speak the same first language, as you would do in England, more or less, then translation is an amazing tool to establish meaning, and it's an amazing tool to hook the new words to in the brain to their English equivalent or first language equivalent. And you look at the audiolingualism, you know, all those drills that everyone criticizing now, you know, it's something like completely anathema. Oh, you shouldn't do this kind of mechanical grammar drills. But actually, grammar drills at the very beginning of learning are extremely helpful, you know, because before you want to get a tennis beginner, a tennis player, to play a match, you do want them to rally. You do want them to bounce the ball against the wall. And so that repetition, that structured repetition at the very beginning, you don't overdo it, of course, because you could be boring, because you could be overly mechanical. But when it's embedded in the context that you have a bit of translation, a bit of drills to practice, and a bit of grammar teaching to understand what you're doing, and then you go into communicative language teaching, which is obviously talking to each other necessarily without following a script. And then if you want to do a bit of TPRS with a bit of nice storytelling, that's the icing on the cake. And then you have my sort of innovating kind of little gimmicks like narrow reading or other work on listening. So at the end of the day, the best approach to me is a hybrid approach, which picks the best from each methodology, because at the end of the day, people before us were not stupid, you know. They must have chosen those approaches for a reason. I mean, and whatever we call now, the great new method, give it 10 years, it will be another legacy method. So basically, whoever comes after us, we call us idiots or ignorant or ineffective language educators or whatever. What is great about now, though, is the research. A lot of research is now saying, actually, a lot of the things that came before us do work. Translation can be effective because when you, at the beginning, you're teaching grammar, for instance, or you're teaching patterns like I do. I don't really talk about grammar as the main thing, but more chunks, lexical constructions. Look at the difference between the first language and the second language, you know? That translation really hammers home to the kid the difference between their language and the language they're learning. When you talk about, for instance, drills, they don't have to be as boring as audiolingual drills, but they can be made useful for communication. Is what I call communicative drills. You know, in the old days, you would just use any kind of context to teach those drills. You know, I don't know, that the rat is in the sewage, the monkey is in the tree. Whereas nowadays, since we're teaching communicatively, you can do drills which are more like more contextualized in the topic you're teaching, which teaches high frequency language, and then the student can recycle when they do an unstructured role play or simulation or communicative activity. What I think we need to bear in mind, though, and this is, I think, paramount, and is the biggest pitfall of much current teaching, not all, because there's people who actually put these things into practice without even doing research, or just intuitively do it. I think the best pedagogic approach to modern language teaching is definitely one that facilitates learning. It seems like an obvious thing, but when I go and do my workshops, and I've done them all over the world now, so the response is the same, whether you're in Australia, England, or Europe, or North America, it's always the same issue. That there's a massive pockets of students, of areas anyway, in these countries where students are highly demotivated. And the reason why they are, I think, is because we're making life difficult for them. Take the books that we use in my school or in other schools around the area. You have like students having to learn one major structure, loads of vocabulary, and 2 or 3 different complex idioms, and all sort of other things in 1 week or 2 weeks, according to the schemes of work of the publisher. And you go, seriously? I mean, in 6 weeks, you have to cover masses and masses of vocabulary. And I wonder, who's that going to benefit? Definitely not the students, because they can't memorize all that, they can't acquire all that. Language learning is such a slow and painstaking process. To actually expect kids to learn a tense or masses of vocabulary in such a short time is counterproductive from the students, for the teachers, and also when we teach this way, we form the future teachers of tomorrow. We're going to teach the same way that we are teaching them now, because research shows that we teach pretty much the same way as we were taught. And if we don't facilitate learning, obviously we are favoring just the few. You're teaching to the few. We're going to carry on at university, those 2 or 3, and just you have masses of kids who are just disaffected after the first year of languages. Take the teaching of French in the very, very early years, like we're talking about year 7 or year 6 primary even. Well, you would have, according to the communicative language teaching approach and many other approaches that are currently en vogue, you have what? Very little teaching of pronunciation, of decoding skills, for instance. And you find that kids get to year 11 or even A levels, and they still can't really pronounce French properly. Or you get them, you ask them to do produce an agreement in speech as they speak, and feminine, masculine, plural goes out of the window. Why? Because we unrealistically demand of them to regurgitate, understand, and then produce things correctly after a couple of weeks, or even, I mean, take agreement. It takes months or years to actually acquire agreement. Yet, because of all the different things that we have to cover, we don't focus on it. Now, somebody might argue it's not important for communication, and I understand that. But then, if you're getting, if your students are supposed to be working using French, so not using French just for survival, you will want a decent level of accuracy in their written French when they write emails. It's not, nowadays, a lot of communication done by email. If you want them to be translators or teachers, or journalists, which is the main jobs that require languages, not the only jobs, because there's loads more nowadays, with business especially. You will want them to have a degree of accuracy, and that's why I welcome the comeback of translation in the exams in England, because at least it forces teachers to reconsider their approach. But I would say we need to facilitate acquisition, which means we need to cut down the content. We're teaching too much. We need to ensure that kids come out of each lesson feeling like they have actually learned, which means loads of practice, loads of exposure to the language, to the receptive skills. And we need to be make sure that the teachers actually channel their intellectual and physical resources correctly. What's the point of making teachers work and work and work on correcting books when we know full well that even when we force the students to look at the corrections, they won't necessarily pick them up? I mean, I wish that language learning wasn't easy, that you just show the correction to a student 1, but even 10 times, and they're going to pick it up.
Right.
Because really, learning is about practicing, doing a lot of practice, getting a lot of exposure, and this is not what we do when we correct, for instance. And I could go on forever about this. So better stop me now.
No, I know, absolutely. We understand. It's been great. There's much like I warned you. I don't know if you can see the chat box, but as you were talking, there was a lot of conversation going on as we were listening to you. A lot of agreeing, a lot of echoing, a lot of things that you were saying. So, absolutely. Well, okay. One thing that I wrote was I said that you were talking about things that are different today than they ever were before, and you cited research being one of those things. I cited social media connectivity as the other, and that this leads me into my next question, which essentially is the Facebook group we've been referring to as Guilt, and I'm going to freeze this. I'm going to bring everybody over actually to the actual Facebook group so everybody can see what we're talking about. Talk to us about why you felt it was necessary to make, when there are other groups out there for certain, and the different ones have different purposes, but why Guilt, and what does Guilt stand for, and let's talk about that for a while.
Sure. I mean, Guild stands for Global Innovative Language Teachers, and the reason why it was created was to, first of all, let me put it in context without necessarily wanting to name and shame anyone. But when I wrote that blog, the blog post, which was 13 commonly made errors in language, modern language instruction, I remember this reaction from the admin of that group, which was basically, teachers have so much on their plate, you shouldn't be negative about teachers, When I reread the blog and I asked my colleagues to read the blog, people were going like, I really can't see anything wrong here. But then it dawned on me that I wanted possibly a forum to express my views and for other people to express their views, where everyone was open to other people's ideas. So I wanted something which was not parochial, so not something just limited to England. I wanted something where people had an open mind, so they would receive other people's ideas with an open mind, without criticizing, oh no, my way is the best, my method is the best. And a place, most importantly, where you would not discuss just your little issue in the school, your little issue with your head of department, although it could pop up as in other groups. But I wanted a platform where people think globally, and they think about issues which would affect teachers universally around the world. So not just England, not just Italy, because as you said, there are plenty of Facebook groups which are based on in a specific country, in a specific clique. I wanted to really go beyond cliques, and I wanted to go beyond fads. And it's great that we have now people from TPRS. We've got people from a very traditional background. We've got people who are community language teachers. We have people who come from all over the world. We even had a preacher yesterday asking a question about grammar construction. And what I didn't like about other groups specifically was that there was nobody from an English teaching background. And it's crazy because TEFL, teaching English as a foreign language, is not only the most thriving business in terms of language teaching, because obviously they make millions, considering that everyone wants to learn English, but because they're business driven, research happens there. So what I found during my master's, which was really shocking, was that I was studying during my master's things that had not yet filtered through in secondary education or the language education, like French, Spanish, Italian teaching, but had been used in English as a foreign language teaching for about 10 years. And what is even more shocking was 10 years later, they actually reached mainstream modern language education. And I thought, like, my PhD, to give an example, was on metacognition, right? In 1997, 1998. Would you believe that metacognition is now huge in England 20 years later? And you go like, seriously? So funny enough, you laugh at this. I remember after my PhD trying to introduce in my department when I was head of French, things that I taught during my master's. And the people who were then my colleagues 12 years ago were just insurgency. You know, you can't do this. This is ridiculous. The same people were still in the same school, now have become the blooming ambassadors of these things. And I'm going, hang on, 10 years ago, you were saying that it was rubbish. Nowadays, you're telling me it's actually the best thing since sliced bread. So Global Innovative Language Teacher is a group that try to incorporate as much as possible people from an EFL background, as well as MFL teacher, world language teachers, as you call them in North America, in order to create an environment which is more, number one, varied, two, more conducive to debate, because these people are ahead of us. And that's what I like about Global Innovative Language Teachers, that you got posts which are completely world language related, others totally EFL, and then there's people like myself and others who try and post and put things which are universal to both languages, basically. You know, whatever language you teach, whatever pathway you come from, that will still apply, because it's just language teaching, language learning in general.
Sorry, I just had I always mute my microphone, that way your voice comes clear. But anyway, sorry. Yeah, no, that's absolutely, it's funny when it was first created, and people are obviously able to tag and invite their friends. I just immediately upon its inception, got all these people going, you got to come to this group, you got to come to this group. It was fantastic. So
one very important thing, Etienne, before I forget,
please, is
that we, whereas in other groups, people get chucked out, just as it happened to me, purely hardly with any explanations. For negativity, we try to ensure that as long as the person doesn't upset anyone else, that doesn't happen. We have chucked out one person, I think, or two, purely when they were being negative to other people, showing narrow-mindedness, like, no, my method is the only right one. Yours is absolutely rubbish. It's happened after many warnings. The main message that the admin conveyed, I hope, throughout the last 4 months. I mean, we already have 4,500 members in about 4 months. Is to be always positive to each other. Absolutely, constantly liking things. Trying and steer people away from negative debates. Only constructive debate. And that's why, if you do join the group, you should make sure that you just put in whatever your query is, whatever your concern is about your teaching, whatever help you need, thinking that anyone, absolutely anyone in there will be trying, could help you, and most importantly, that nobody is going to criticize you or dub you as an idiot or as inept just because you asked a query that to you might sound like petty, but we all know that in teaching, very often it could be the most trivial issue that make a day a complete disaster. So that's a very important thing for us.
Absolutely, good thing to add. Absolutely, thank you. Okay, well, the last question that we have, and let me just check the time here. Yeah, we're right on time. This is perfect. So the last question we have, I was surprised. I have a hard time keeping up with things. I'm very much like you. I'm all over the place doing a lot of things. So I missed your announcement that you will be stepping away from the classroom for at least a time being. And so question number 5 is, this is a recent announcement. What is it regarding? What are your plans? We're very curious to know.
Yeah, well, basically, first of all, I've been teaching for way too long. I need a little break. I've never taken a break, and there have been times where I've done more than I should really. My health, my time, my food, allows me to do. I've always pushed the boundaries, and now I got to an age where I have to be a little bit more careful about how I distribute my energy. I use my brain and my body. So what I've decided to do is take a year off. Number 1, to rest. 2, to finally complete the book that I'm writing with Steve Smith about listening. Try to fix all the glitches and the errors in my games website, languaging.com. Devote myself, most importantly, to disseminate my pedagogic approach, which I called EPI, Extensive Processing Instruction, which is basically the idea that we operate as secondary teachers, especially if you're in an English system, in a very low contact regime, whereby we see the students 1 or 2 hours a week. So my method is not rocket science. It's basically a way to maximize the time we have through a number of techniques, which are both curriculum design based, for instance, what I call the seed planting technique or implicit learner routines, and to ensure that what we feed the students in that hour and a half, whatever that we teach, it's done in a way which is time efficient. Because I found myself, a few years ago, when I hadn't thought about these things, when I hadn't, I just read the chat saying 2 hours a week is not much. I don't have 2 hours a week. I have 1 hour and a half, for instance, and it's actually not a lot of time for language learning. It's not a lot of time, considering that what you want your student to achieve is to be able to automatize what you teach them. Then 2 hours a week is not a lot at all. It's not a lot at all. And so the whole point of this sabbatical year, hopefully I'll go back into teaching as soon as possible, so a year or 2 maximum, is really to do more research, more writing, more disseminating of research. I'm already doing some trips to Australia, one in February, one later on in July. I'm going to go to England in June. So that possibly visit North America soon. And the whole point is to try and really disseminate what I believe is good practice, and some of the things that I just told you earlier on in response to your second question. Try basically to spread the word about research and about what I believe good teaching is, but also to really try and reassure the teachers that a lot of the things that some gurus say they're doing wrong are actually right, you know. This thing that you have to use 90% target language in the class, where does it come from, really? Who says that you have to speak 90% of the time in French? Or Spanish, you know, and depends on the context, you know. You might have a day where you are doing a lot of work on metacognition, and you may want to speak in English. There are times where you don't talk at all because the kids who are doing the whole lesson in French or Spanish, whatever the language is. I think that, for instance, I give an example where translation is absolutely crucial with beginners. When we do reading, we ask kids to answer questions, right? I always make the joke that when you speak to your little one, your daughter, your son, whoever you're looking after, when they are little, you don't question them with, you know, is this a diaper, true or false? You know, you don't go, and where is the kitchen? You know, first floor, second floor, or not mentioned. You don't do that. You model. For one of my PowerPoints recently, I chose this really cute picture of a mother brushing her teeth, and then you have the little daughter imitating her. And to me, this is exactly what you should do. If you are teaching listening or reading, let's go to reading. If you're teaching reading, you want to model. Yeah, you want to do exactly like the mother does with the daughter when she's brushing her teeth, and she's showing every single detail, every single bit of the motion, and we'll explain, you know, put the brush this way, this inclination, and do this and do that. Whereas we don't do that with reading. Sometimes we give the students these amazing, beautiful passages in French culture, and really cool, full of history or nice, great facts about France and what the French do and all that. And then we ask them to just ask them question of where did it happen, who did it, when did the person die, and who, in which paragraph do they mention the Eiffel Tower, you know? And this is not conducive to learning. This is not modeling. This is quizzing. And this is my pet hate, because if you really want to teach, you need to make sure that a student goes through each and every word, or most of the words that they are reading, unless you're preparing your kids for survival, in which case it's absolutely fine. You know, if you're just saying, right, I don't want my students to really be able to speak or understand every single word in a text. I simply want my students to be able to go to France and survive. And that could apply to a lot of kids from certain backgrounds, you know, who may not be academically ambitious, who may just want to know enough to get by when they go to Spain on holiday. Fair enough. But if you want them to learn from a text, a beginner level, for instance, translation is amazing. You know, there's an activity I do which I mention all the time. It's one of my favorites. I call it BAP translation. You know, you have a text in French or target language, whatever. You have a translation alongside, and the translation contains 10, 12 mistakes. Yeah. When the kids have to actually search for those mistakes, they are really processing the whole of the text. And it's great to hear that come and used it and worked really well with their kids, because my kids absolutely love it. They have this tendency, they told me, when they do reading, to just look for keywords, the keywords that allow them to answer the questions. Now, again, if you look at keywords for keywords and you just answer the question, first of all, half the time they're guessing. Secondly, you're not really processing the text thoroughly. They are not at all. So this is a bit of an issue for teachers when they're not using translation, for instance. Or when you model sentences, new sentences, for instance, I believe I'm obsessed with sentence builders. I believe the sentence builder or substitution tables, whatever you call them, I'm sure you know what I mean, is this kind of grids where you have a number of phrases, could be time markers, tomorrow, today, now. Then you have another chunk, I play, I do, I read, and basically in each column you have chunks which you can combine together to produce sentences. Now, I love using sentence builders when I introduce vocabulary for the first time, because it allows me to present vocabulary in context. So I make sentences, the kids equipped with mini boards are writing down the translation. The sentence builder have the Spanish, the French, whatever it is, with the English translation incorporated, so that the kids are not lost at any time. Learning is maximized because the kids feel safe all the way, because it's there, it's in French, it's in English. They get from the teacher a nice sentence, well formed, well explained, with the English next to it. Because of the English, they can already start making inferences about the differences in structure between the target language and their own language. And when I do my student voice survey to find out which activities the kids like the most, they always come out with sentence builders for learning, because so before me or before, they used to just get words. You know, they would have the typical LinguaScope activities where you have the picture and the word, a dog, a cat. Whereas this way, for instance, because of translation, I can actually create sentence builders where the kids are introduced immediately to a sentence. I like cats because they're fluffy. I like dogs because they're playful. I like spiders because they're scary. And immediately, because of translation, I can introduce the kids to a sentence without having to go through all sort of acrobatics to explain. There was this teacher that made a comment. He said, "Oh," to one of these activities, said, "Oh, great activity. Shame is translated in English." And I said, "What do you mean? What's wrong with English?" And she said, "Well, you just don't do it." And I'm like, "Can you give me the reasons why providing the translation to that sentence builder is taboo?" And she couldn't give me any. Because psycholinguistically, we code switch all the time. The brain doesn't work the way people think. Oh, you think in one language. No, all languages are activated in what's called parallel activation. So now I'm talking to you in English, all my other languages are activated at the same time. One is dominant, the other ones are dormant, but actually, when you think about it, especially in a country like where I live now, which is Malaysia, where people speak a native level, like 2 or 3 languages, you often, and you see that with immigrants, you see that with bilingual people from birth like me, that we lapse from one language into another. Code switching is normal, and I would argue that in this day and age, you need, it's imperative to be able to code switch. Because in this day and age, in the global world we live on, the brain must be prepared, whether you're working or not with the language and through the language, to change, to switch from one language to another. And research shows that that's a skill in itself. Because if in a working environment where I'm now, where I have a Spanish person, 2 or 3 French people, Chinese, Malays, and other nationalities, I, for one, very often in the same hour, switch from 1 to 4 different languages. And it's not a skill you should take for granted. You're not born with that skill. One of the reasons why language learning benefits the minds of young people is because it develops exactly this ability, this skill. It's this ability to monitor, to self-monitor your output and to switch from one language to another, from one topic to another. And it's something that our brain doesn't necessarily do naturally.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
I was just sorry to interrupt. We have reached our hour, actually, and that was so quickly. But I just wanted to say, and I want you to definitely finish your point. I just wanted to kind of chime in to say, if anything, this just absolutely cements a couple of facts. One, we need to have you back. So I hope that maybe even say mid-year.
Listen, Etienne, being Italian, I love to be on the spotlight. So yeah.
Okay. Well, it's
you can call me as many times as you like. Maybe we can do it in more humane hours.
Yes, exactly. We will. Hours that work for you, absolutely. And I also too, we can begin talking too about getting you over here to North America, like some of the teachers here have been asking. There's certainly ways that I can help with that. So that would be fantastic if you would be open to that.
Pleasure. Yeah, of course. It'd be great.
Excellent.
Are there any questions from the panel?
That's what I wanted to know. Before we have to bid adieu or à bientôt, does anybody have any questions? One of them was how to connect with you. I know some people were asking me privately. So, I mean, that's why I threw up while you were speaking there the website once again, language/gym.com, just because I thought that was one sort of landing point where they could reach you. Is there anything specific?
My blog is Gianfranco Conti, WordPress.com.
Okay, I'm sorry. Say it again. Or did you want to type it?
So somebody asked me to wave at them, so I just waved. I said my blog is gianfrancoconti.wordpress.com.
.wordpress.com.
Yeah.
Did I do that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay, good.
That's the one.
All right, let me scroll up to see. You're getting a lot of thank yous. That's what you're getting.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's awesome. Okay. Well, no, that's great because I would like to kind of follow you on your journey if you don't mind. I would love to have you on again. Yes, the next time will be an hour that suits you, and then people can, definitely they'll make their way over for sure. Grazie. I love it. That's awesome.
Prego.
That's awesome. Okay. I want to also welcome you and everybody that's here. Next time on Shop Talk, we do have another very special guest, Catherine Osomon, who's an award-winning presenter from the United States. She will be with us.
Yeah, I know that, yeah.
Okay, excellent. So everybody's absolutely, welcome to meet us there. And if you did happen to join us late, we are recording it. Gianfranco was very gracious to allow us to do that. So we will be actually putting it up on the djdelf.com website. So it's just djdelf.com/shop talk. And you'll see Steve Smith's interview there. You'll see a lot of really fun things there. So I do welcome people to come back. But again, thank you so much for joining us in the wee hours of the Malaysian morning. Are you going to work in a few hours or?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
In 4 hours.
Oh my.
No worries. Really, I hardly sleep anyway.
Okay. Well,
I'm pretty used to this. Yeah.
Well, again, we can't thank you enough. So thank you so very much, and look forward
My pleasure.
The great thing is this is just the conversation will continue because we're all going to be on guilt and we're all going to be continuing from here. So it really doesn't really stop. So that's the there's no sadness here.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Etienne, for having me, and all the best.
My pleasure. Take care.
Take care.
All right, and thank you everybody for joining us on Shop Talk. Again, we hope you will join us on the next Shop Talk episode, where we do have our special guest, Catherine Usana. And everybody, have a great week. We hope that you have just been energized by today's session, and will take that energy into your French classrooms, Spanish, English classrooms, and your student, to the point where your students are asking, how come you're smiling so much? And you can say, well, it's because I was with Gianfranco Conti on Shop Talk. So thank you very much. All the best to you, and let's stay connected.